We get to walk by faith and not by sight. And let me tell you, it is definitely an adventure. Hebrews 11:6 says that it's impossible to please God without faith. So if there were no other outcomes besides just bringing pleasure to our Lord, it would be so worth it. But Hebrews goes on to say that he's a rewarder of those who earnestly seek him. We just had an awesome example of this as we planned our first ever fundraising banquet for the Grand Island Center just last month. One of my favorite things about the 6 fundraising banquets that we've had in Kearney the last 6 years is that there's always someone who believes in what God is doing through the ministry so much that they are willing to underwrite the entire cost of the event. Approached the situation in Grand Island, we didn't have any existing donors that had seen that. So we definitely had an opportunity to walk by faith and to watch God work. And I'd had a couple of ideas of different people that I might approach that might be able to help us financially. But all the time I just sensed God saying, wait. And so the date kept getting closer and closer. Joey, our new director there, she asked me one day, she said, what are we going to do? And I said, you know what? I said, just wait. I said, God's gonna provide. We just have to wait and see. It will be in his perfect timing. Well, it was within days, literally within days of her asking that question, that she got a phone call from a gentleman in Grand Island that had heard her speak in a church. He'd expressed a desire of giving a substantial donation to the center. So at that point, Joey was like, okay, Gaye's got to take care of this. So she gives me the message, and I call him back. And as I shared the several different giving options with him, he just got so excited. And when he learned of the opportunity to underwrite the entire cost of what it would take to put that banquet on last month, he jumped at it. And he said, I'll get your $10,000 check in the mail this afternoon. That was so awesome. We were so excited, because that we weren't sure, but we knew that God is not a man that he should lie, but that he rewards those who walk by faith. After directing this ministry now for almost 14 years, the ministry team has learned not to react to our circumstances, but rather, after spending time worshiping the Lord and asking him what his plans are for the ministry, we respond to what we sense that he is saying to us. We call it presence-based leadership. Leading from a posture of intimacy with the Father through worship, listening, prayer, and all in alignment with his word. Another way to put it is that we don't come up with a plan and ask God to bless it. Instead, we see what he's doing and we join him there. It was after an extended time a couple of years ago of me asking God actually all of our whole board of asking him what his next strategy was for Collage to impact his people here in central Nebraska, that he put Grand Island on the hearts of several of our board members. And honestly, I freaked out a little bit. That wasn't on my radar at all. I mean, I felt like I had more than enough to do in Kearney. But he made it clear that we needed to walk through that door to the east of us and just see if there was a need. So after visiting with many community leaders and counselors and nurses and pastors, and even the team there at Birthright, for those of you who are aware of them, they assured us that there was indeed a need and that they would come alongside us and help us in any way that they could. And then came the announcement that Planned Parenthood was seeking to come into Grand Island, as well as several other Nebraska communities, including Kearney. So we knew that as we stepped through that door to go into Grand Island, we weren't reacting to Planned Parenthood's news of opening a center there, but rather we were responding to what the Father was saying, and we knew that he was calling us for such a time as this. This concept of presence-based leadership or even presence-based living is something that I'd like to challenge you with tonight. Pat mentioned it as she introduced me. And it's a passage from Joshua chapter 5. It starts in verse 13. And I just want to read through those verses with you. There's just a couple of verses, but it's Joshua chapter 5, starting in verse 13. It says, "Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, 'Are you for us or for our enemies?' 'Neither,' he replied, 'but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come.' Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, 'What does my Lord have to say to his servant?' The commander of the army replied, 'Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy.' And Joshua did so." Joshua was a trained and skilled warrior. Marching around a wall 7 times without saying a single word probably wasn't the battle plan that he was thinking of as he stood outside the walls of Jericho. But when he laid down any plan or agenda or experience that he might have had and spent time worshiping and inquiring of the Lord, what does my Lord have to say to me? That's when Joshua received the strategy that the Israelites needed to win the battle and eventually enter their promised land. So, when we as individuals spend intimate time worshiping and adoring the Lord through music and reading his word and asking him for his plan, and then taking the time to listen to his answer, that's when he reveals the strategies that we need to win the battles that we face. Oftentimes, like Joshua too, God's answer is a little bit different than what we expect. A great example of this in our ministry at Collage, out of a time that I had with the Lord, I had been approached to sponsor a concert at UNK with a Christian heavy metal artist named Brian Head Welch. He used to be the guitarist for Korn. I don't know if anybody has his music on your iPods, but here's a picture of him just in case. He's the guy in the middle. Do any of you younger people know who he is? Yeah, we thought so. Okay, good. Oh, yay! He did write a terrific book. He was a young man that was not only in the heavy metal music, but into drugs and alcohol. And in fact, his wife was in an abortion clinic, ready to end the life of his first child. And he was with her, and at the last minute, she changed her mind. And so he is now the proud dad of, I think, a 18 or a 19-year-old. But his story's on our website, too. I want to check it out. We did an interview with him. But anyway, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me for a Christian ministry, a pregnancy center, to sponsor a heavy metal concert. I just couldn't quite get it in my mind that it was rational. But yet I knew that God was leading us to bring him in and to use him as an outreach on campus. And after asking God what exactly his plans were for this concert, he gave me the idea of having Angela come in and share her story a bit in person, because that would be the age group that we were most trying to reach, that 18 to 26-year-old age group. And I don't know, you can see Brian's tats and all of that, but I don't know, Angela kind of covered him up a little bit in the video that she did for us. But she's a beautiful gal, but she's covered with tats, and when someone's going to talk about the ways that God intimately reaches into our lives, she is a believable messenger when it comes to people who would attend a heavy metal concert. So I'm just saying, we knew that God had orchestrated this, and we knew it was in his perfect timing, but we really didn't understand how perfect his timing was until after the concert, because there was a young man that came up to Brian after the concert that told him that a year later, a friend had given him one of Brian's CDs, and that CD had helped him through a really, really rough time in his life. But now things had just continued to spiral downward in the months to follow. In fact, he said that things got so bad that he was at home one night and he put a gun against his head and said, God, if you don't do something, I don't have any other choice but to take my life. And at that very moment, his cell phone rang, and it was his sister. And she said, there's a Brian Head Welch concert in Kearney next month. I want you to come with me. And this young man said that he put down the gun at that very moment. And the night of the concert, he went forward and gave his life to Christ. You know, that story means so much to me for so many reasons. But on a personal level, it means a lot to me because a few years ago, my own brother did take his life that way. And for God to use me in some small way to help a sister and a family not have to go through what our family did, I can't tell you what that means. And that all came out of a time of me intentionally spending with the Lord, sitting at his feet, worshiping him, and asking him, what does my Lord have to say to me? And as we live lives of faith that force us outside of ourselves and our own comfort zones and trust God to minister to those that are hurting around us, we will radiate his unconditional love and his never-ending mercy, creating beauty from the unexpected. Thanks for letting me share tonight. I appreciate it.